On the evening of August 24th, 1814, the air over Washington City hung thick with smoke. The young American capital was barely 14 years old, a fragile experiment carved from swamp and ambition. Broad avenues had been planned with European elegance in mind, but many remained muddy and unfinished. Government buildings rose in pale stone against open land that still felt more frontier than metropolis. At the heart of it stood the President's house, what we now call the White House. Its sandstone walls gleamed faintly under the late summer sky. It symbolized more than executive power. It symbolized survival, independence, the idea that a republic could stand among empires. But that night, it was nearly lost. To understand how close America came to watching its capital erased, we must return to a war that most Americans today barely remember, the War of 1812. By 1814, the United States had been fighting Great Britain for 2 years. The causes were complex: maritime rights, British interference with American trade, and the forced impressment of American sailors into the Royal Navy. But beneath those tensions was something deeper. The United States was still proving itself, still fragile, still doubted by the world's greatest power. When Napoleon fell in Europe in early 1814, Britain suddenly had more troops to spare, and London made a decision: punish the Americans, strike at their pride, show them that rebellion still carried consequences. A fleet sailed up the Chesapeake Bay. British forces, hardened by years of warfare against Napoleon, landed in Maryland under the command of Major General Robert Ross. Their objective was not conquest, it was humiliation. Washington City lay exposed. American defenses were thin. The capital was not heavily fortified because many leaders believed the British would target larger ports like Baltimore or New York. Even President James Madison struggled to believe the British would march directly on the seat of government. They did. On August 24th, American militia met British regulars at the Battle of Bladensburg, just outside Washington. What followed became known, with bitter embarrassment, as the Bladensburg Races. The inexperienced American forces broke under disciplined British fire and fled in chaotic retreat. The road to Washington lay open. Back in the capital, First Lady Dolley Madison refused to leave immediately. As rumors spread of British advance, she remained inside the President's house, overseeing the safeguarding of national treasures. One of them was a full-length portrait of George Washington. That portrait mattered deeply. Washington was not merely a former president. He was the embodiment of the Republic itself. To allow his likeness to fall into enemy hands would have been more than symbolic defeat. It would have been psychological devastation. Dolley ordered the portrait removed from its frame. According to later accounts, the heavy canvas was carefully cut free and rolled for transport. Important papers were gathered, silverware packed, carriages loaded, but time was running out. By late afternoon, British troops entered Washington. They marched with discipline through streets that had emptied in panic. Government officials had fled. Residents hid or escaped into the countryside. Smoke already rose from smaller fires set along the outskirts. When British soldiers reached the Capitol building, now known as the United States Capitol, they set it ablaze. Flames consumed the chambers of Congress. The library was destroyed. The symbol of American law and representation burned against the darkening sky. Then they moved toward the President's house. Accounts from British officers suggest they entered calmly at first. A dinner table reportedly remained set, prepared for a meal that would never be eaten by its intended guests. Some officers allegedly helped themselves to food and wine before carrying out orders. Orders that would change American history. They set the building on fire. Torches were applied to furniture, curtains, and wooden beams. Flames began to crawl along the interior walls. Heat intensified rapidly inside the sandstone shell. Windows shattered. Smoke poured outward. By nightfall, the president's house was engulfed. Across the city, other government buildings burned. The Treasury, the War Department, the Arsenal. Washington, the symbol of American independence, was in flames. For a brief, terrifying moment, it seemed the Republic might not survive. Foreign diplomats watching from afar wondered whether this experiment in democracy had already failed. European monarchies had predicted American collapse since 1776. Now, the capital lay smoldering. But what happened next is one of the most dramatic and often misunderstood moments in early American history. As British troops continued their destruction, the sky began to shift. Dark clouds gathered with unusual speed, the air pressure dropped, winds picked up violently. By some accounts, a powerful thunderstorm, possibly even a tornado, swept into Washington that evening. Rain fell in torrents, lightning split the sky, winds tore through the city with sudden force. The storm was so intense that it reportedly extinguished many of the fires the British had set. Roofs were ripped away, cannons were overturned. British troops, unprepared for the sudden violence of the weather, scrambled for shelter. Some reports even suggest that a tornado passed through part of the city, causing additional destruction, though historians still debate the exact nature of the storm. What is certain is this: the weather forced the British to withdraw sooner than planned. Within roughly 24 hours of their arrival, British forces left Washington. The capital was scarred. Government buildings were gutted. The president's house was blackened and hollowed, but it still stood. Its exterior sandstone walls had survived the inferno. Though the interior was destroyed, the structure itself had not collapsed. That survival mattered. The White House would be rebuilt. Congress would reconvene. The war would continue. Just weeks later, at Fort McHenry in Baltimore, another dramatic moment would unfold, one that would inspire the Star-Spangled Banner. But on that August night, in 1814, the future of the United States felt uncertain in a way few Americans today can imagine. The Capitol had burned. The president had fled. The symbol of the Republic had nearly vanished. And yet, it did not. From the ashes, reconstruction began almost immediately. President Madison returned to the city within days. Plans were drafted to rebuild the public buildings. Rather than abandon Washington and move the capital elsewhere, an idea some proposed, Congress chose to stay. That decision was profound. To rebuild in the same place, on the same foundations, was a statement to the world. America would not retreat. In the years that followed, the president's house was restored and repainted. The smoke-stained sandstone was covered with white paint, reinforcing the name that would permanently define it, the White House. Today, millions visit Washington, D.C. each year. They photograph the White House without realizing how close it came to being erased from history. They walk through the Capitol, unaware that its first great trial was fire. The burning of Washington was humiliating. It exposed weakness. It revealed poor military preparation. It shook national confidence. But it also hardened something inside the American spirit. The nation did not fracture. It did not surrender. It rebuilt. And perhaps that is the deeper story. Not simply that the White House burned, but that it endured.